Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and today I'm speaking with Andrew Worland. He's the Managing Director and CEO of International Graphite. The ASX code is IG6. That's IG number 6. These guys only listed in April of 2022. So hip, hip, hooray. It is their anniversary, their 1-year anniversary. So Andrew, great to see you. I want to hear all about this story because not only is this you've just been listed for a year, but it's graphite, which is part of this whole revolution, the green revolution, the EV, etc. And I don't think many people talk about graphite. So before we get into, I guess, the deep dive, could you just give us a brief overview? The first time I've had a chat with you, so can you give us a brief overview of who are International Graphite?
Hi, Kerry. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you. And yet we're a year old, as of Good Friday, in fact.
Oh, there you go. Happy Easter, happy Friday.
Indeed. So, yeah, it's been a really, really busy 12 months for us, and we are embarking on what's an incredibly exciting journey for the management and for the shareholders, I think. We're in a space that's incredibly interesting. The decarbonisation theme around the world and the demand for lithium-ion batteries is enormous. And graphite, I think, has been an underappreciated commodity in that spectrum of battery minerals for quite some time. But we see that set to change over the next 18 months to 2 years in particular. We see no reason why graphite won't be the next lithium. And so we think we're in an ideal position with great quality assets. The genesis of International Graphite itself, it really is around downstream processing, which is where the graphite industry is actually focused these days. Our founding chairman and investors were or still are metallurgists and engineers that have done a considerable amount of feasibility work for most of the graphite developers that are sitting on the ASX or AIM at this point in time. So there's very few projects in Africa and Australia that they're not experienced with. And with that experience came the insight that certain types of flake distribution in those deposits required a different sales journey than sort of the coarser and jumbo flakes, which is historically what you've heard from the graphite industry. And it's the fine flake material that's perfectly suited for battery anode materials and the lithium-ion battery. They saw the need and the opportunity to diversify the global supply away from China. At this point in time, every tonne of battery anode material that finds its way to a lithium-ion battery is processed through China. So a concentrate in Africa would be mined, or the deposit in Africa would be mined, concentrate produced, it would be trucked to the port, it would be then shipped to China, and then the battery anodes would be produced and it would go around the world to the battery manufacturers. They saw the opportunity to deleverage away from China, which is what sort of North America and Europe are trying to do now with their free trade agreements and their government-sponsored programs, and set up some feasibility work around trying to generate if you like, a toll treatment facility to the graphite concentrate industry. And so when IG6 listed, our DNA was really around downstream processing. And the folks at Comet Resources that owned the Springdale deposit down in Hopeton in Western Australia saw the synergy between what we were doing in downstream and the asset that they had under their books. And so that was the marriage that was made for us to launch our IPO. So we have a great quality asset that shows itself to be perfectly suitable to battery anode materials in Springdale. And we had the downstream processing ambitions and technology and intellectual property within the group to develop the various flow sheets required to treat that material.
Okay, I think I've got it now. So Comet Resources had the asset.
Yep.
That's now come into International Graphite. You've got a team of people, and my ears pricked up when you said they've worked on assets in Africa, like pretty much all over the world. So this team's come together and said, actually, if we get together and find a good asset, we can add value through the downstream. So I want to find out how that works. So
that's precisely right, Kerry. So the value in graphite is in the downstream processing part of the business. The graphite mines, if you like, have been on the books for most of these development stage companies for many years. Excuse me, but the dynamics of the market have changed. Historically, the focus was on jumbo and coarse flakes because they were the most amenable to the particular markets that they were being sold into. And many of those deposits had a fines component to them that struggled necessarily to find as good an economic home as perhaps they could do today. And so for us and for our team, it was about, well, the opportunity came to acquire a deposit that had exactly the right characteristics all the way through it, that found its way directly to the battery anode material marketplace. And that's the market that's going to be expanding rapidly over the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years if we are to achieve our decarbonisation goals through the electric vehicle market.
So what happens at the moment, Andrew? So for example, these mines in Africa, they've got the graphite, they ship it to China, and China does the upgrade to be able to. So what you're saying is we've got assets in Western Australia. We're going to keep them in Western Australia, and we're going to upgrade within Western Australia for the lithium-ion battery market. Precisely. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, you want your downstream processing facility as close as you can to your mine. Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. And the logistics chain, obviously, for those African miners that are sending their material to China and ultimately want to send them into North America, as many are looking to do at the moment with the IRA that's been put out by the Biden administration. Ultimately, you want to put your downstream processing as close as possible to your mine. That makes the most economic sense.
Is this unusual what you're doing, or are others doing? I'm just curious if you're doing something that others aren't at the moment. Is this unusual?
Historically, you would say yes. I mean, typically in the mining industry, downstream processing is not something that Australia has been particularly successful at, nor has it been really part of the financing equation for most companies. They've been able to sell their materials or their concentrates into existing facilities that operate mostly in China, but in Asia more generally, I guess. And so it is an emerging theme, not just in graphite. You've seen lithium hydroxide plants emerging in Kwinana, the nickel sulfite plants being developed in Kwinana as well. So Western Australia itself is trying to create its own, if you like, downstream battery hub that consolidates the raw materials into the value-added products, which, again, not only does it make perfect sense for the miners to want to be able to do that, but from a government perspective, you'd want to encourage industry to maximise the amount of value that you're exporting. And I think that's the space that we're all in at the moment, is that why should we dilute our value and the value of the people's assets, which is the raw materials in the ground? Why should that value be captured elsewhere overseas when we're perfectly capable of being able to capture it here in Australia with the own IP that our metallurgists and engineers have?
Yeah, and I want to talk about your team, because I often say you can have the best asset in the world, but if you've got the wrong team around it, it's never going to get anywhere. So what makes your team unique? Because is it quite challenging to get this downstream process right?
For sure. All downstream processes require a high degree of energy. And as I said, the experience is not, there's not as extensive level of experience here in the industry professionals in downstream as there are in sort of the upstream parts of the mining business in the concentrates. But we've been very fortunate that we've been able to, and our chairman, Phil Hurst, and Dave Pass, our technical director, have nurtured a small team of high-quality individuals in the engineering space that have got history in academia, history in CSIRO, history in China itself with downstream processing. So we do have a couple of hands-on operating experience, as well as R&D experience, and as well as their own feasibility level of technical work that they've harvested over 10 to 15 years of looking at mining operations, concentrate operations, and downstream operations in China.
As I talk to you now, Andrew, I know that you've had a scoping study just out. So can you talk to us around the numbers? What does that scoping study show you? Because the audience that you're talking to, a lot of them, they're very smart, wonderful audience out there, but they'd like to hear about the numbers and where the value add, I guess, is going to come from.
Sure. So the scoping study we put out this morning the intention with that was to give investors some idea of the scale of the battery anode material facilities that we're looking to build in Collie. At this point in time, Springdale in itself hasn't got itself to a JORC compliant production plan, so we can't link what we think is going to happen down at Springdale to the production profile at Collie. So what we've done is...
Sorry to interrupt you, Andrew, just to be absolutely clear, Springdale is where the graphite is. That was the Comet Resources asset, which you now have.
Yeah.
And Collie, which is also in West Australia, is where the processing is going to happen. Am I correct?
Correct, yeah. So the intention is Springdale will be mined, 95% concentrate will be produced at Springdale, and that'll be trucked to Collie. Collie's about 200 kilometres south of Perth. Springdale's just south of the Ravensthorpe nickel mine, the Mount Catlin lithium mine on the south coast of Western Australia. So it's about a 650 kilometre trek to Perth from Springdale. So the concentrate would be produced at Springdale at 95% quality. That concentrate would be trucked to Collie, and then it'll be treated through a battery anode facility in Collie. Now, the scoping study was prepared based on a notional capacity to treat 40,000 tonnes of concentrate per annum. They would go through a micronisation and a spheroidisation phase. And what those two phases do is essentially brings the fine size of the concentrate down to a battery anode fine. So it might be, let's say, less than 100 micron in the concentrate. The graphite in concentrate would be less than 100 micron. It needs to get down to somewhere between 50 to 23 micron for battery grade. And what that first process in the flow sheet does is take the fines particle size down to a battery grade particle size. The third part of the phase is called purification. And what we're looking to do there is take your 95% concentrate up to 99.95%, which is your battery grade material. And these are universal steps taken. They're nothing specific about Collie. These about Springdale. These are steps you take that are irrespective of the concentrate, the nature of the concentrate. And the fourth step, well, so I'll just pause there. At the end of the purification phase, you have an uncoated product, which is a saleable product into the market. And there are many off-takers that will take that particular product at that point in the cycle. The last piece of the puzzle is coating, and it's the coating step that provides the most value to the finished product. And you have then a coated, what they call a coated, spheroidized, purified graphite product. And that's the space that I think we're all aspiring to get into. And it's where the highest economic returns are generated. In terms of the scoping study, the capital cost to produce that first product, the uncoated product, was estimated at $87 million. And the capital cost for the coated product was an additional $135 million for a total of $222 million. So that's the capital size. The projects, both of those two projects would produce an NPV in the order of, and the uncoated, somewhere around $290 million, and in the coated product, $626 million. So near on $1 billion of NPV on the coated product.
One of the things you just said, I've got to go from coated to uncoated. I don't know where I'm at.
Uncoated to coated.
Uncoated to coated. Why is what's the process with the coated? Because you said 87 million and then an additional 135 million for the coated. Is the process quite complex?
Well, you're dealing with very, very small material that goes through a number of large furnaces and trains. And so just the breadth of capital recognises just the extent of the equipment as it's playing around in such minute, fine product. Trying to get that coating of the carbon coating across the particle size is intensive, and so that requires quite a degree of capital, and the breadth of the capital and the footprint of the capital is quite significant.
Give us an idea of some timelines. I'm talking to you in April of 2023. What's the news for the rest of this year, and what are we looking timeline-wise? Are we looking 2 years, 4 years, 10 years? I don't know. I mean, graphite's not my expertise.
Sure. So in terms of the feasibility study, let's take Springdale on its own for the moment. That is a bulk standard concentrate operation. So nothing particularly challenging from an engineering or metallurgical perspective on that. We'll go through our steps there are finish off a resource update. We've been drilling since April or June of last year. We've done 20,000 metres of RC and diamond drilling on the property. We should come out with the final assays in the next 6 to 8 weeks for that drilling program. We'll have a mineral resource update probably towards the end of June. And what that'll do for the first time is reclassify resources from inferred up into indicated, as well as expand the resource because we've made 4 discoveries on the properties in that campaign. Yep. And so we'll have an increased scale of resource and we'll have an increased quality in resource. And with those 2 measures, we'll be able to start doing the first mine plans and optimisations and so forth for Springdale. That'll take us into a pre-feasibility phase, which we think we can have finished by September, October of this year. And at that point, we'll have a PFS on Springdale, which will articulate production profile, capital costs and operating costs and so forth. And then we'll be able to integrate that back into the scoping study we've just released today on Collie. And so for the first time later this year, we'll have a full, proper integrated mine-to-market set of economic forecasts, if you like. Then we have to take those studies from that PFS scoping level through to definitive feasibility study level, and that will take us through until June of next calendar year. So our goal is by June, July of 2024, we'll have a fully integrated definitive feasibility study between 2 hardcovers that'll demonstrate the economic viability of producing a concentrated Springdale, trucking that to Collie and producing a battery anode material in Collie.
Andrew, what's the biggest challenge that you've got in because it's good, I like it, it's adding the value in that downstream process, but what are some of the challenges facing you as you go down this road?
Well, I think the biggest milestone that we can achieve is to bring in a partner from the industry that is going to endorse the project. And so our goal as a management team is really to deliver the most efficient, economic, defendable, optimised mining and processing plan that we possibly can, so that we can take care of the financing of the project through the introduction of the right financing partners on the most anti-dilutive measure possible for our shareholders. And so that's our focus. Our team's very, very focused on value and optimising the path of the projects. And if we do that right, we should be able to facilitate the introduction of a partner or a set of strategic partners that we know really, really need graphite and are looking to be involved in Western Australia. And we can de-risk the project for them in a fashion that probably very few companies globally can do in a jurisdiction like Western Australia.
And that's all well and good. With that funding and are you already starting to look at partners and possible ways of pulling that together?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a number of interested parties in data rooms and so forth at this point in time that are looking to explore options of transactions with us that will benefit us on the funding path of the projects.
You and your team have been around in graphite for a while. Some of us listening are saying, don't know a lot about graphite. Just briefly, can you talk about the market, the price? Is graphite, is there a supply-demand imbalance there?
Huge imbalance for graphite. So if we step back, what is graphite used for in terms of the space that the International Graphite's interested in? It's the lithium-ion battery and it's the anode. So 95% of the anode of the lithium-ion battery is graphite and nothing else. And so when you see the chemistries for different lithium-ion batteries mentioned, they're talking about the cathode, they're talking about nickel, they're talking about cobalt, they're talking about lithium, they're talking about the combinations of those raw materials inside that make up the cathode. The constant through all of that is graphite in the anode. And so I don't think it's been particularly well recognised just how important lithium is, certainly that's been recognised, but how important graphite is in the battery. So you need something like 10 times more graphite than lithium in a lithium-ion battery. And so I think that's pretty much been very underappreciated. If you think about it, though, what's the globe trying to achieve, the world economy is trying to achieve? There is something, we need something like another 200 million electric vehicles on the roads by 2030 to 2040 to meet the goals that the Paris agreements and so forth are looking for. Now, in every 75 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery, there's something like 66 kilograms of graphite required, which is by weight the most significant raw material in the battery. And so if you extrapolate out what that means for graphite demand, you start getting it to the end of your calculator and you can't actually see any more zeros. So the industry itself has to magnify itself by anywhere between 7 to 25 times over the next 10 to 15 years to be able to fulfil those decarbonisation goals through the electric vehicle. And so we're looking at an enormous supply deficit in graphite. As we like to say, there's room in it for everybody. And so we don't necessarily have to sit around and peer rate one another, because the demand is just so high that there's capability for everybody to get involved in this.
Do you think being in WA is going to make a difference? Because you spoke earlier about China and Africa. Look, I'm not going to diss them, if you like, but the fact of the matter is that some people prefer to get their graphite from, I guess, a place like Australia. Do you think that's going to make a big difference?
I think it should make a huge difference. Yeah, it's we've got the most stable regulatory environment, the strongest OH&S records. For a company like International Graphite, we'll be able to tell the users of our material exactly where the material came from in the mine. We'll be able to show exactly what part of the mine the graphite came from. We'll be able to show them the path it took from Springdale through to Collie. We'll be able to demonstrate and show them the Collie facilities. We'll be able to show them the graphite getting into a container and being put on a ship to export to North America or to Europe. And so that signature, the DNA of where that graphite in that battery is ultimately originated from, is a signature that's very unique to what we're trying to do, and some others that are looking to do similar things to we're doing as well. So I think the Western Australian focus with single assets linked together is quite unique, and I think it's going to be extremely well valued by end users over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, well, we're running out of time, so I have to get you back on when's the DFS coming out, did you say?
Well, DFS will be June next year, but there'll be plenty of milestones between now and then for us to get together, Kerry, and chat.
Oh, well, I find this whole area fascinating, but we're running out of time. Everyone knows I like to wrap things up by saying, tell our audience out there why they should be sitting up and taking notice of International Graphite. ASX code is IG6 right now.
Well, I think graphite is clearly an underappreciated element. It'll have its time, whether that's tomorrow or in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, it's going to have its time. So I think now is a unique opportunity, particularly with our scoping study out today, for investors to take a good hard look at IG6 and be involved. The numbers on the study themselves were, we think, absolutely compelling, and from an NPV and IRR perspective, so there's real value there for investors relative to today's share price. And I think the third factor is that our DNA is in downstream processing, and that is where the value in the graphite industry sits. It's great to have a good mine, and we're going to have a great mine, we think, down at Springdale, but ultimately it's the downstream processing capability and our ability to leverage into those higher coated prices that's going to distinguish us from others.
Yeah, distinguishing you from a lot of others with that added value in the coating side of things. Andrew, it's been fascinating to chat to you today. I'm sure we could go on for a lot longer, but for now, thank you so much for joining me on Small Caps, and we'll catch up again in the next few months. Thanks so much.
Great pleasure. Thanks, Gary.